want you to take a trip back in time with me. It's March 2020. After a couple of months not knowing what's going on, not knowing that there was going to be a worldwide epidemic, I opened my company email, checked my inbox, and got that dreaded message that so many of you have also gotten, which is, you will be working from home now indefinitely. It has been quite a while since the pandemic started and the work style and everything has changed. And I think it's been enough time for us to now be able to reflect back on some of the time that has passed, what we have learned, and start talking about the future of work. What is it gonna look like? What is gonna change fundamentally about how we work? Hello everybody, okaeri to my channel, or if you're new here, welcome. If you don't already know who I am, my name is Sakura. I work and live in Tokyo, and I am currently working for an American fintech company. Now today is going to be an interesting video because I haven't seen anyone make a video about this just yet, at least in my feed. And I was inspired by a piece of a report that I saw done by Microsoft, which I just had to share with you all, and then share with you my own conclusions and thoughts about what the future of work is going to look like. Let me begin by introducing you to this wonderful article/report that I read. It's called "Hybrid Work is Just Work. Are we doing it wrong?" Dun, 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 dun. It is posted on the Microsoft website under the tab Work Lab, which I believe seems to be like a collection of articles and or blog posts or maybe reports. I haven't really looked into it, but this is the one that I found. The data on this report covers over 20,000 survey respondents over 11 countries. And essentially what it is a collection of data about hybrid work, productivity or perceived productivity by employees, and I believe corporate employees, and then what leaders can do, what kind of pivots leaders need to make in order to make this work style hybrid work more sustainable in the future. Those three key findings can be found again in the report. I will not be going over it today, but rather talking about some of my own conclusions and thoughts. So let's dig right into the first and most shocking piece of information that I read on this report. So in this survey, they asked two groups of people, I guess, and one is the employees, or what I call the ICs, individual contributors, and then the second group covers leaders or managers. And if you can see this lovely little graph here, it says that 87% of employees reported that they felt that they were being productive in their job, doing it at home or in a hybrid work environment. However, only 12% of leaders said that they are fully confident that their team is being fully productive. Yeah, I know, it's scary. I don't want you to get scared. This is not to fear-monger you or anything like that, but read the full report. It's quite interesting about these findings. People are paranoid that you're not doing work at home. That's it. That's pretty much it. And then this report goes to talk further about what they call productivity paranoia. And I want you to go again back in time with me where we started hybrid working, right? We had a lot of experimentation about going into work, being completely remote, and now being in a hybrid situation or not, or being fully remote or not. Whatever it is that you've done, we have all experienced this transition or phase where we have tried these different mindsets, right? The difference now between in-person work and hybrid work or remote work is that you cannot physically see the employees or your teammates or your ICs doing the work in the office. Managers do not have visibility to what you do physically, and that scares the hell out of them. And the reason why I think managers are so scared is, think of it this way. I'm only an IC. I've never been a manager, so I won't be able to say for sure. But managers are in charge of their team's performance, and that is part of their manager performance, right? Which means that if you don't take good care of your team, and if your team doesn't do well, that means that your performance is going to be low. Now, here's the kicker. What's interesting is that because they had that physical, I guess you could say, visibility to the work that you do, they felt safe. As long as they saw us doing something on the computer or having some sort of remote conversation about work, they were happy. But now that they cannot see that, what they only have access to is our calendars and what we tell them as ICs to our managers, right? So people are getting paranoid. Some companies go as far as to have like what's it called? They track your mouse movement. So if you're not online for a certain amount of time, people freak out. So this perceived productivity is interesting because leaders, I think, have less confidence that their employees are, less productive or more productive. But at the same time, it's never really been about tracking productivity, has it? Because if you think about it, just because you're in the office doesn't mean you're actually doing work. Just because you're doing something on your computer doesn't mean you're actually working. I mean, I hope that we are. Most people are. But you know what I mean? So it made it more of a kind of toxic environment in the sense that if you cannot prove, or what they call theatrical performance or theatrical productivity, if you cannot prove to your manager that you are actually doing work to them, to their face, they're not going to think that you are. And I'm not saying all managers are like this, but there is maybe that innate fear and less confidence that you are doing the work that you're supposed to do. I thought first this is scary because it is so clear, and a majority of people think they're productive, but only 12% of leadership cannot be fully confident that people are being productive. What I think is happening is that there's just a huge lack of expectations. And if you work in the tech field, I think you'll understand this more as well, but there's always so much ambiguity about things that are happening. First of all, the industry itself is so high-paced. Things are changing all the time. These performance reviews are so in-depth, but at the same time, so cryptic. If you ask your manager, how do I get a promotion? No one will ever give you a straight answer because there is no magic formula, which I do agree. There shouldn't be a magic formula to get a promotion. However, there is such a lack of clarity in the priorities and the expectations. And not only the lack of clarity, but the changing of clarity and priorities is so prevalent in tech culture and corporate culture that it makes it really difficult for the employee, and I'm sure for the manager, to say exactly what they need to do in order to get a good performance, in order to be working hard. So what I think is going to be necessary here is defining these, priorities and expectations with your manager, right? Moving on, let's talk about what happened when we started doing remote work and hybrid work. What happened is that we started to develop our own sense of priorities. If it wasn't clear before, it is clear now. For me, my expectations and what makes me happy is, again, that freedom, autonomy, the flexibility to work from anywhere all the time. And then for some people, maybe it's stability. Some people, maybe it's collaboration. Whatever the reason may be, you now have a clearer picture of what you want and how you want to work. Now, here's an interesting statistic from this board. 73% of employees need a better reason to go to office than just company expectations. So let me break that down. What does that mean? We are no longer happy going to the office if it doesn't make sense. Now, I know what some of y'all are thinking. You probably think, well, it's the company's decision for you to work, so you don't have a say in this. No. Things have changed. Now that we have our priorities of how we want to work, and we have seen that it works, at least I think so. I think that it has been more than well proven that people can work from home remotely, productively, whether leaders think it's a good idea or not. There needs to be a strong justification for people to be forced to go back into office, right? And this sentiment has been clear as day since we have started working from home, since we have hybrid remote work. These opinions that we have as an employee are much, much stronger than they were before because we didn't know a world where we could do hybrid work or remote work. The last piece of information I'll talk about is a phenomenon that I think, again, has been heightened because of hybrid work and the pandemic. For me, when I was really lonely at home, working from there, I started to look for a bigger purpose. I started to think that because work has been the center of my life for so long, especially in the beginning part of remote work, I started searching for something more. I wanted to feel happier in my personal life. I wanted to feel healthier. I wanted to take up hobbies. Everybody was making dalgona coffee and knitting and having all these different hobbies. And why do you think that happens? It's because people were yearning for a sense of connection, a sense of continuous learning that they were now faced with because they only had work at home now. Because these trends of learning new things or picking up new hobbies is part of our innate human kind of instinct to want to continue learning. I think that feeling has actually bled into the work that we do too. Again, justification. We needed more purpose. We needed something more than just producing output in order to enjoy our work. I cannot speak for everyone, but that's just what I observed in myself and like the teammates around me and stuff like that. So let me know if this resonates with you. So back to the report. The report said the majority of people, over like 76% of people, said that if they had more learning opportunities in their current company, then they would consider staying longer at their company. And also, this was divided based on generation as well, as you can see in this really neat little rainbow graph here. Not surprisingly, what this graph shows is that the top three generations, Gen Z, Gen X, and Millennials, me being a millennial, these three generations, over 60% of them, perceive that the best way to advance their career right now is by switching companies. Possibly older generations, for example, like my dad's generation, they really were taught to be loyal to the company, right? Like your loyalty will be rewarded if you work for this company for 20 years, but no longer. Our younger generation says, no, we are thinking for ourselves now. If we'll do what benefits us. Obviously, these are two extreme sides and ideas. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I am saying that there is a distinct kind of difference in generations. It makes me sad that a majority of people, over 60% of these generations, think that they have to switch companies in order to get to where they want to. So why is that? It means that maybe there's not enough learning opportunities in their own career or own job. It means that maybe there's a lack of internal mobility, that you can't move around in your company. Maybe the politics is really bad. I mean, whatever reason may be, I think that job hopping is seen as like a really big option for you to advance your career in some way. Now let's talk about some of the things that I'm going to predict for the future of work, like the actual part where I'm talking about what I think will be the new trends or more direction that we're going to see in the future of work. Remember when I talked about productivity paranoia? I think that is going to be more and more prevalent. What I think we're going to see a lot more of because of this reason is a result and or output-oriented performance culture. So let me break down how that is. When we talk about performance and productivity, I think most companies that I've worked at and around me do a pretty good job of looking at two things in productivity. Like one is, what have you done? Like what are the certain outputs or like actual projects or finished things that you can say that you've done to say that you've been productive or say that you've had good performance. And the second part, what Google says, the how, they use this in their, branding and stuff. But when they talk about the how, right? Like it's not just about the output. It's not just about what you've did and here's like the list of things that you've done, but it's about the how. How did you get there? What is the effort that you made to get to that point? And that is included in part of the performance. Now, because of the productivity paranoia that we're starting to see, and I think the lack of kind of certainty and mistrust that we're seeing right now, I think that performances are now going to start having what I mentioned before, like clear expectations of what we're expecting from the employer for them to be considered in good measure, like doing well, performing well, right? But only looking at the result-oriented things. And the reason why is because those results and the output are the things that you can physically see, that you can physically talk about. I can tell you I put in 5 hours of work to do this project, but I think that's no longer really going to be seen as like part of your productivity because it's not something tangible, right? Besides, if I made this like document saying like, hey, I did this report, you did the report, you can see the report, right? And this is really scary for a number of reasons because first of all, you cannot accurately reflect how much like the work that you've done in the output of what you've put out, I guess, accurately without talking about the process or the how, right? The second part is, more than you think, a lot of fields and organizations within a company, you cannot judge just based on the output. And the reason for that, I'll give you a clear example. If you work in the field of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, right? Hot topic, everyone talks about it. If you have worked anything remotely close in the field of DEI, you will understand very quickly that it is almost impossible to move the needle more than like this much, even per year. Like months? Are you going to look at it on a quarterly basis of how much output that you've done? Like how many more percentage of women that you've hired for your company in one quarter? Diversity, equity, and inclusion is going to be a years-long process to transform a company to become more inclusive. Like, how do you define that? How do you make that happen? Like, what do those OKRs look like in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion? So if you're in that field, imagine your manager telling you like, oh, if you don't hire or if you don't have 50% more women on your team, like you failed. Obviously, the work that goes into this field cannot be accurately reflected in the output that you have. So that's the point that I want to make. Sorry, bad example, but you get my point. Many companies are going to get this very, very wrong. I think the performance aspect of the company is going to be quite more challenging for people who are working in a remote or hybrid environment. So I want you to keep that in mind. Now, what we can do about this situation is, again, make clear expectations, right? Like, this is a takeaway that I want you to have. Because I assume the companies will probably want to have a more clear expectation of what they want you to do, you have to make sure that you understand that, and you have to make sure you understand the context of that. So start having these one-on-ones with your manager about like, what does a person successful in my role look like? What kind of behaviors, what kind of outputs are you looking for me to be considered doing well on my job? And by having these clear expectations, aligning them on a consistent basis, I think that performance evaluation and your career, ambition and direction will be more and more clear. Some companies already have this kind of culture. For example, in my opinion, I think like Amazon has this, Netflix has this. So it's still quite common already, but I think more companies are going to shift towards this. So another prediction on the future of work is that face-to-face is never going to completely go away. It's interesting because as much as I love remote work, I really still understand the sentiment of companies wanting to have people in person because there's nothing that can replace that connection as well as the kind of creativity that you can have in person. Companies are going to start doing their best to use any technology possible to try to make this happen. So for example, like AI and the metaverse, like I think I saw an article the other day about people trying out their new hire onboarding in the metaverse where you're like an avatar. We're always going to be striving towards this culture of like mimicking in person. But it's never ever going to be as good as it is in person. Like it's just never going to replace that. And I think that companies who are going to do really well is embracing that fact without pushing it onto people. So basically when we talked about the statistic of like employees needing a good justification to go into office, I think companies are going to have to do that. They're not going to just have their, employees are not going to be happy if they're forced to go into office, but if they do give these meaningful experiences, these meaningful offsites, ways to connect, these good reasons, I think that would be an amazing asset to a remote work or hybrid work environment. But a company needs to do a really good job of setting that environment up in order to succeed in that sentiment of like, in person is great. Last but not least, I think nobody is going to agree with me, but I think it's already happening. So let's talk about it. I absolutely think because of all of this, and including some of the things I'll mention in a second, the employment market is going to be so much more of a candidates market in the future. And let me go into what that means. As I just mentioned, remote work, hybrid work, that has become an integral part of some people's lives. We have had a taste of it and we're never going to be able to let that go. It's like once Adam and Eve had that poisonous apple, or the forbidden fruit, you're never going to forget the taste of the forbidden fruit. But anyways, besides that, so I think employees already have that kind of new option, right? When you apply for a new job, if you want that kind of option, that's going to be an option for you. So companies will have to be more flexible if they want to keep good candidates. The elephant in the room. So it's ironic because I think this happening is terrible for candidates, but it's turning our employment market into a more candidates market, and that is the layoffs. You have also seen it. For me, the last several months, maybe it's been more than 6 months, every other day I will see a post about somebody getting laid off from their company. I have seen so many talented people get laid off. I've seen companies that first were just a few now become several and many, including big tech companies like Airbnb, Meta, Amazon. There's so many. Like, I'm not pointing them out just to point them out. I'm saying that because they're big companies, but there's so many others that laid off people. And if I'm going to be completely candid, like I was really lucky because my company laid people off as well, but I was not one of the ones that were. And I think it was just awful to hear some of those stories that I saw on LinkedIn. Like, people said I woke up, I went to my laptop on Monday morning and I didn't have access. And I didn't know what was going on until I realized that I was laid off that day. Or people who were on student visas in the US that needed to get a visa to sponsor a job. What are they going to do? People who were on maternity leave, paternity leave. I mean, it has just been completely terrible to see all these terrible things happening to real people. So again, sorry, just kind of I digress. But basically what happened to the market then, I think, is that people started thinking that if you're going to treat us like we're dispensable, that we're replaceable, that you don't need us, and you can throw us away after 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years of working there, just all of a sudden like that, then we are going to take care of ourselves. And again, there are so many people, older generations mostly, saying like, oh, but company loyalty is so important. Like, how can you do that? How can you say that? Like, you're just all entitled millennials. But it's not true. These are real people's lives that are being affected by the layoffs. And honestly, I've learned that we can't take offense to that. A business is going to operate as a business because it needs to make profit. If it says that we have, too much people on the team and we need to cut to make our budget, then they're going to do that. So you need to do the same for yourself. You need to look out for yourself. You need to do what's best for you, pick the option that's best for you and not regret it, not look back, not feel guilty because these companies can cut you off in any minute. Anyway, that's a little bit cynical, but other cool things that are happening. One is I've seen, for example, in the US, in some states, they're starting to have pay transparency where they say in this state, if you're posting a job posting, you must put down the salary range. I think that's absolutely amazing. I think that the lack of pay transparency is still something that we deal with on a day-to-day basis, and it's really unrealistic for recruiters and for people to say. You just have to fight for what you're worth because that's not how things work. You can negotiate and you can counter offer by saying you have another offer, but we never still have the understanding of like, what is the expectation and what is the pay going to be? So the fact that there's more openness and more action and even laws created to protect candidates to say, hey, like we need to post a salary range for these jobs, I think it's a really amazing sign that we're, again, going more towards the candidates market. I think it's going to be, I'm not going to say easier, but it's because it's never going to be easy for candidates to get a job. But I think that there's going to be more transparency. There's going to be more options. And I think there's going to be a much higher standard than there were before for candidates who are searching for jobs. I feel like I run my mouth too much. So I hope that this video was at least interesting to you, if not insightful for you. It's been a rough few years for everyone, some more than others. And I think I'm really privileged to have a stable job, at least knock on wood right now. And I'm really lucky to be in a position that I love and also working for a company that treats me well. I want you to know that work is only a part of your life. It doesn't have to be the central of your life or priority of your life, which I had mistakenly thought for the last 5 years until, last year. Let me know in the comments below what you thought of my predictions as well as some of the data points that I discussed in the report. I would love to hear what you think of the report if you read it. And let's continue this discussion. Again, this is not answers to anything, but I think it's something that we need to be constantly considering and reflecting and learning from in order to create a better work environment in future for all of us. All right, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you hopefully in my next video. Feel free to click that subscribe button, comment and like if you like this, and follow me throughout my journey in my career on my channel as well as my vlogs too. All right, see ya. Bye.